jump in here. Okay. All right. First item on our agenda is a generalized review and discussion of the most recent drafts of the Hartwell Innovation District zoning and related amendments and the next steps in the process. The latest drafts are dated January 21st, 2021. Some of us have already seen them. We now have a quorum, by the way. John McWeeny has joined us. Oh, John, will you unmute yourself? Can you?
And Todd has joined us as well.
Todd as well. Todd has joined. Amanda Loomis is here. All right, we have a quorum, so we'll have an official meeting.
So Rick, you should take a verbal attendance then.
Okay. Charlie Manazian, present. This is painful.
If all
George Brunel.
members, if all voting members will unmute for a minute, go and so that you're ready to answer the question, then Rick can be more efficient with an attendance.
Charlie Manazian, present.
Present.
George Brunel, present.
Present.
John McWeeny, present. We'll come back to him. Larry Smith, present.
Present.
Rick DeAngelis, present. Yes. Back to John McWeeny. John, unmute yourself. John, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, good. We have a quorum. All right.
Yep.
Moving along, Sanjay or Amanda or both, Sheila, who would like to start and give us a generalized description of where we are with the drafts and what are the next steps? What is coming up this week on Thursday, both at 8 in the morning and at 7 in the evening?
I could start and then Amanda could recap as well. So we, as you know, the Hartwell Innovation Park rezoning, we have drafts based on all the feedback that we've received from the public outreach sessions that we conducted since October, and the latest drafts are available online. Our last meeting was this week with the select board and the planning board. We gave them a recap of each and every article, including Hartwell rezoning and other articles that will be presented during the annual town meeting in March. And this week we also have the last public outreach, which is a coffee hour. We do not have any agendas and we will not be recording that particular meeting, but it's an open coffee hour session for anyone who has more feedback to provide for the zoning bylaw. So currently we have a draft of the zoning bylaw, use table. We also have the map amendments and we have a draft of design guidelines on our website for review and comments. In addition to that, for the requirements and regulations, we also have a draft of Lex leads and Lex sites on our website if anyone wants to look at those drafts, but those are early stage drafts. So as far as the public hearing process goes, I believe public hearing starts on February 4th. Amanda, are you able to unmute yourself to talk more about?
Yep, I'm here. So on February 4th, we are just going to be going through the zoning bylaw, which I believe a lot of people have reviewed. We are collecting comments. A new edition will not be released until after that February 4th meeting, just to limit the number of editions out there to make sure that everyone's kind of reviewing the same one. So if anyone has comments, please do send those along, because we will be putting out another update after that February 4th meeting.
Okay. Just so you know where we may be as a committee or as individuals or organizations. I, along with my Boston Properties colleagues, have spent quite a bit of time reviewing the amendments as they've come along, and we have submitted comments and questions to, and had a phone conversation yesterday with Amanda, Sheila, Tanya, and Casey. And I think I would encourage all of our members to dive in and dig into the documents and ask whatever questions you have. Kind of time is fleeting, and we don't have the luxury of waiting weeks and months to dig into this. So I'd encourage you to have your voice heard. And in order to do that, you got to spend some time looking at it and put together some comments. Again, we have done that at Boston Properties, and I think that what we've done is representative of what the general development professionals in the area would submit as comments. On this call this morning, Ben Myers and Keir Evans and Catalina Padilla, all of Boston Properties. Ben is the Director of Sustainability, well-versed. I think he and Mark know one another quite well. Todd, you may know him as well. And Cindy, you may know Mark, Ben, you may not, but this is as good a time as any to be introduced and hear the comments on sustainability that we have at Boston Properties. I will tell you that from our perspective, we believe as a company in sustainability, and I think you'll find that that is the general case of all developers. But we have a both an academic, but more importantly, a real world application and view of how the sustainability provisions could be improved. And I'm here to encourage the town side and the private side to meet in some fashion or another to walk through and talk through the sustainability provisions and see if we can come up with a program that works. My fear is that in the zeal to draft complementary and additional zoning amendments, we're going to do it in such a way that it's going to chill the development process and suggest strongly to developers that they're better off going elsewhere because they're never going to be able to satisfy the requirements. You need requirements that are reasonable and can be and are achievable. So with that said, we brought along Keir and Ben and Catalina today so that we could open up a dialogue offline today, but somewhere to talk about the provisions, principally sustainability, which we support, but think need modification. So, anybody else care to comment?
Good morning, everyone. This is Keir Evans of Boston Properties, and thank you, Rick, for chiming in. Thank you, everyone, for just giving us the opportunity to be here and to chat with you all. We really appreciate it. And firstly, I know that there are some people on this call that have been involved with the drafting of the new zoning language. So really, just to start off, like really, really well done. It was really thorough and really thoughtful. And we just want to applaud you guys for taking this, call it overlay district step with this zone. It's a really effective way to encourage development. And you know, I wish that there were some other towns nearby that would follow your guys' example. So our applause on that effort. And and also for engaging the developer community to let us even to let us see it and provide feedback. So thank you. I guess we can talk about specific components of the zoning if we want, but just in general, I thought it would be worth pointing out that our reading of a number of the clauses in the zoning in particular is that they're designed to be stretch goals, right, for the developer community to try to move the market forward, which are good things, and we'll never move towards a more sustainable environment, right, if we don't try, or if we're not trying to push the envelope. From an implementation standpoint, what I think we would be looking for as a landlord and a developer would be, the best way I can describe it is like a less prescriptive way to get there. It's really helpful for the town to establish goals or a definition of success that we need to meet. But the more flexibility that the developer can be given to arrive at that goals, the better, right? So there, as an example, there are different levers that a building design team might be able to pull to reach a certain the LEED gold rating or a certain amount of emissions that that we need to solve for. And there are also there are examples of this. I'm thinking particularly in Boston, because I just went through a permitting process there where the city recognizes that some of the things that it was asking for are either not yet achievable or are prohibitively expensive from a technology standpoint, but that the technology is coming in a couple of years, right? So they put a large demand on a project I was working on there to be able to meet that forthcoming requirement in a few years. So it meant, demonstrating that we had put in place, this in particular was related to electrical charging vehicles, but we had to demonstrate that there was infrastructure in place to support future expansion of EVs or other equipment in the building, right? So you have to, as the landowner, we had to demonstrate that our building was going to be flexible and viable going into the future, and that we weren't just building something that was going to be compliant today and then immediately become obsolete, in 2 years. So to BP, at least, that's incredibly important because we are long-term landowners, and we look at all of our designs as something that we're going to own and operate for 99 years or longer, right? So we need to make sure that we are building something that's going to survive, and we're not just going to flip it and make it someone else's problem, right? So that's all we're trying to build into the language that you guys are developing is more just a path that we can implement day one, and we understand that the building and product needs to grow as sustainable technology becomes easier and frankly just better and more efficient to put in place. That's the context for some of our comments. Ben or Catalina, I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that.
I thought that was good, Kier. I tend to get into the details because I'm often called in by our development teams to figure out and problem solve sustainability. So when I was reviewing the very ambitious standards that Lexington's setting forth, which I would echo, Kier's remarks, applauding those efforts because I think they're definitely well intentioned. I look for the areas where I see pitfalls and I see uncertainty and I see aspects that may chill the development process, as Rick pointed out. So I would just name a few specifics where I think we really need additional engagement and maybe some clarity and maybe some less prescriptive approaches. And first I'll say, we've come a long way since our first green building in Waltham. When we were developing that 12, 13 years ago, we could build a building with twice the energy use intensity and would meet code. And we've had ASHRAE 90.1 updates and stretch codes in Massachusetts, and Lexington's a stretch community, and that's all been great. And what that's done is it's caused us to build product now with intensities that are half of what we could build, and when we were calling buildings green. And that process has involved a lot of industry engagement, has involved lots of MEP engineers and developers and experts in building science to develop the ASHRAE 90.1 standard. And now we're seeing a move to create net zero stretch codes and EV charging standards that are not informed in the same way. It's very much being done at a local level based on ambitions to decarbonize the built environment and transportation sector. Again, both things we need to do and we need to do quickly. But the practicality of some of these things and the reality of implementation are, I think, sometimes overlooked by policymakers and the community that don't understand the technical limitations that we have before us today. So at a high level, I think the LEED requirement's great. I think a lot of people don't understand the differences between LEED version 3 and LEED version 4. The standards are based on LEED v4, and basically a LEED version 4 gold is a LEED version 3 platinum building from our experience, working across many projects. So really what we're saying by saying LEED version 4 gold, we're saying LEED version 3 platinum, and platinum in the context of Hartwell Avenue under version 3 is very difficult, if not impossible to achieve because of the site density and context and the location and transportation related credits. On version 4, gold is definitely a stretch, and it's going to be a stretch for a lot of companies because of the omission and the ineligibility for this, because of the service density, the density of services, and basically the location and transportation credit category. Not as concerned on the energy stuff. I think everyone can get to a V4 gold energy performance. Maybe not everybody, but I'm confident we can. But some of the other credit categories are not as easy in this site context, and we need to acknowledge that. There's also a lot of moving parts and pieces on the building materials credits and the EPDs, the environmental product declarations, and the amount of those you need to collect in order to earn 50% under that credit category, which is what's being proposed. That's also, we've been able to do that once on one project. And many manufacturers and suppliers just don't have those EPDs prepared. So they're not easy and readily accessible today. So again, I think we're trying to move the goalposts, and we may be moving them beyond where the industry is at the moment on things like EPDs for building materials. And so I think as a requirement, a LEED v4 silver is probably appropriate at this point in time, but putting emphasis on the energy credit category, if that's where you want people to make the most progress, but not making it about location and transportation, and because of the site constraints and the context and the building materials because of what's available in terms of EPDs. So that was the first one. I know I'm going on a little bit longer than I hoped. The second point I think is an important one in the same vein, just setting expectations that are achievable on EV charging. I think we will get to a point where 10% of parking spaces may be used for EV charging at the office. We see many of our customers preferring to charge at home, and the utilization rates in the suburbs reflect that truth, even with the small amount of EV charging we have today. We would prefer to see something like a 10% readiness requirement with something lower, like 2%, because the technology is changing very quickly, and the demand at this point in time, it doesn't match up with the 10% requirement. So what's going to happen is we're going to install a bunch of chargers. It's going to look great. We're going to celebrate electrification of the transportation sector, but they're not going to be used. And by the time they're needed to support increasing EV adoption, the technology will be antiquated. So we'll be replacing underutilized charging stations in the future. I think the goal should be make sure your service capacity, your switch gear is sized appropriately to add these stations and up to a certain percentage, and have the conduit run, have everything ready to go. So that's not a constraint in the future. as the stations are necessary. And we certainly want to serve our customers. We're not going to say no to a customer because we don't have, we don't have EV charging. But I have seen situations where buildings just don't have the headroom on the switchgear to support the charging. So make sure that's baked in to the building and it's able to add stations over time, up to 10%, but I think, or 25% or whatever it may be. But the 10% requirement out of the gate in this context, just, it seems really high given the reality of how EV adoption is occurring and also the reality of how people prefer to charge, which is at home, which is what we're seeing.
And can I just add one thing there? This is an example of where we saw a program in Boston that we thought was interesting. It was tough to comply with, but it was, I thought it was reasonable. We got a new garage license permit for our project at 100 Clarendon Street. And the requirement was that 25% of the initial construction spaces had to be EV ready. And then 100% had to be, I forget the exact term, but like there's one level down from EV ready essentially. And you had to, you were given essentially a points system of how to comply with that. So it differentiated between levels 1, 2, and 3 type charging stations. You were able to get points through things like electric car sharing or electric van sharing. And you were in basically the compliance was achieved through getting it to a certain number of points. So it recognized the fact that some garages may be space constrained, so you were able to achieve more points by putting in fewer higher powered chargers. Like the level 3s were worth X many times what a level 1 charger was worth. So not saying that Lexington needs to develop a program exactly like that, but just as an example of a little bit more of a flexible, scalable approach that a developer can follow over time. And to Ben's point, it also acknowledged the fact that the utility needs to be involved in this conversation as well, right? So when you ask for a higher power demand through more charging stations, you're going to need, X many more transformers, X many more amps that are available for the property. And that often will result in additional space that's required for new equipment, or the utility might just tell you off the bat that, we don't have capacity in the street, or we need to upgrade, service up and down the street to actually get to the site. So some of the comments that we had given back on the zoning said that, to demonstrate that the property can evolve over time as equipment starts to move towards full electrification, a developer should be asked to demonstrate that there are extra pad sites or an easy ability to add transformers to the property over time. Maybe you're sizing your electrical room in the building, to Ben's point, for either additional panel equipment to be added easily, or additional capacity to be added easily, just so that you understand that this will scale over time, but that day one the utility might not want to give you that extra transformer if it's going to sit dormant for 5 years or more. So we thought it was more about providing room to grow in an easy fashion versus overbuilding day one, which, selfishly from a landowner perspective, that will help people get over the sticker shock of investing a bunch of additional money up front that may or may not become, useful for a number of years. So it just takes a little bit of the sting out of that, while we think also accomplishing what Lexington would be looking for as far as an easy path to a more or a less carbon intense, more sustainable built environment. So.
Okay. That seems to suggest that the public side and the private side ought to get together very soon and walk through and talk through the sustainability provisions and see what accommodations can be made that benefit both the town and the development community.
Rick, one more point where I think some clarity would be great, and where I welcome more dialogue is on net zero requirements. We didn't get to that. I do understand that there is a net zero guide that we should be well versed in before we go into this conversation. But my primary interest is in what we do for offsetting any emissions from electricity consumption and potential gas consumption on site. What the appropriate or acceptable pathways are in the event that we have a net zero code, and we may get a state code, right, before we get something in Lexington. Depends on how this all evolves with the new climate bill. But I am very curious about that, because we need to be honest about the typology of the types of buildings we're going to have here, and the capacity of on-site generation that is achievable on rooftops and on parking with solar PV. And there will be if we're looking at a carbon budget, there will be a carbon footprint, if you will, that we'll need to address off-site. And so what the off-site compliance pathways look like, I think we should just be very clear about that up front. Understand what the potential initial costs and operating costs associated with those compliance pathways are. Because right now it seems like that's the elephant in the room. And by not addressing it, we're implying that we're going to have zero net energy buildings, right? And we know that's not possible. So we're going to have zero net carbon buildings. How do we achieve zero net carbon when we can't generate everything on site renewably?
Okay. Anybody else care to, other than Boston Properties people, care to add to the conversation? All right, I would leave it with.
Rick, this is Mark Sandine. I would be happy to be part of whatever offline conversation, but right now I'm on the road and not really conducive, but would be very happy to be part of any offline conversation.
Why don't the appropriate people circle up, and I'm happy to act as the conductor and arrange for something along with maybe Amanda or Sanjay or Sheila.
Yeah.
And
Happy to schedule something. Absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Mark, thanks for volunteering.
I should mention that I'm taking time out of this meeting because I think this is like such an important conversation, and I'm happy to see Lexington leading. And I also, if I wasn't doing this, I'd be working on our carbon neutral operations plan, which has kept me up the last couple nights. Is absolutely something we want to achieve for all of our buildings. And we want to create models that have the impact we desire, right? Like actual tangible mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, but also projects that can be built so we can continue growth and development for the economy. And it's going to be a tough nut to crack, but I think the combination of incentives and the cost curve on renewables, and there's so many promising tailwinds that weren't here 5-10 years ago. So let's continue to push the envelope, and I'm happy to get into the weeds with whoever cares to join in just a follow-up discussion.
Well,
Thank you.
my view is that we want to be in a position where we have a goal, but that we're working with developers to achieve that goal, and not just setting a high bar and walking away from it. So this will evolve And what we have today should probably change in the years as they advance and as technology advances. So I know that Mark is an expert at this as well, and has a practical aspect to it. So hopefully we can put something together that is helpful to the developers as well as to the environment.
Okay. You're right. Anybody else?
Hey,
On this
Rick,
topic?
just a couple of comments. I'm not one that likes to have sustainability mandated at all. I'm always an early adopter. In 1985, I built a building at Cranberry Hill that was a all electric building, used heat pumps. We were the second building to use heat pumps. They're 3-to-1 energy efficient. I might add Riverfront in Cambridge was the first. So, at a time when nobody was using all electric and nobody was using heat pumps, we did. Well, we did it because the utility companies were offering what they called the J rate, which was a preferable rate if you design your building as all electric. And that J rate lasted exactly 9 months from when I opened the building. And then they abolished it because they thought it was a preferential treatment. And I'll never believe another utility company again. I mean, it literally, we went from having a rate that gave us a benefit to having a rate that was probably 30% higher than our buildings with or other buildings with VAV and gas and all that. So I don't make decisions based on utilities, and you can't forget the utility companies here are all fossil fuel. You're not going to find a utility company who will get an electric bill that isn't in the area significantly, I mean almost all fossil fuel driven. So the rates on the utility company is something that you can burden the developer with, but they're paying the Eversource and grid rates that and they're burning fossil fuels to power their grid. And finally, this group will recall back in 2012 or 13, I put a whole bunch of EV chargers in my buildings because somebody had a Tesla when the stock was $32 a share. And we're now up to 2%. I have 8 in a lot of 400 cars. Do I have more demand than that? Not right now, but I know, we're seeing it come up. So, we've increased our transformers in the building. It does raise havoc. It causes your loads to be imbalanced on your electricity, your 3 legs of power. So it does need some planning ahead. But just finally, and Mark knows this, I don't like sustainability mandated to the developer. Just my 2 cents. I think the proactive developers will do it. And, BP and they're good examples of proactive developers, but those are my 2 cents.
Okay.
But that's important that we understand as we draft whatever we want to have, that we understand the various views.
Okay.
I'll just add, Charles Hornig, that it's important that all of this be expressed to the planning board at the public hearing, either directly or in writing before Thursday.
Yep. Now, Thursday's tomorrow. So on behalf of EDAC, I intend to, in Boston Properties, I intend to attend, if you will, the planning board meeting, hearing, whatever.
And Rick, just to pile on, because EDAC is advisory to the select board, it would be helpful if you sort of put this in writing to us as well.
All right, this is not something that, you know, today's Wednesday and
No, it
tomorrow's
doesn't have to
Thursday.
be today, but at
Yeah.
some point before we vote on all of this, we would, you advise us in our voting. So it would be
Yep.
helpful for us to have your information.
Okay, we can do that. We can do that. Actually, there's a memorandum that was prepared and which the folks that spoke have contributed to. We can pass that along to you as well.
Is this being recorded, Rick?
Pardon me?
Is this being recorded?
I believe it is.
Because I think it's really of such quality that, I think it's better than some of the stuff if we put it in print.
Well, are you suggesting we make the recording available to
Yes.
other boards?
Yes, I am.
Bill, what do you think of that?
I will, I mean, I don't think there's not an official problem with it. I don't know whether there's a technical problem in that. I don't know how long these recordings get kept on, what our cloud capacity is, but we can find out.
Well, technically you can download it. It's whether you want to publicize it. It's a public record. It's not as if it's a secret, but.
All right. The question is the transferability, downloading transferability. I will confess it's way beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, I'm recording it on my computer, so I can definitely download it and put that in YouTube and send you a link for that.
And actually, Sandhya, if you talk to Kim Katzenbach, we have a software in the select board office that can transcribe from an audio recording. And that may be more effective than having people have to listen through the beginning where we go through, all of the figuring out attendance and everything else. We could actually publish the transcription piece of this conversation.
Thank you, Jill.
That would be great. John makes a good point, and Jill makes, a complimentary point. Reading the dialogue, the point counterpoint would be very helpful. Okay.
Hey, Rick, can I make one last comment? Does this group remember when Joe Zink and Bob Buckley came in, talked about Marlboro and Andover and, the towns that are going, completely no rules development district to allow development to occur. And those are the towns that development has occurred in the millions of, square footage. I mean, as much as I look at this bylaw, I spent some time looking at it last night. I mean, that's what's happening out in our world. It's not looking backwards and looking at a zoning bylaw that has dimensional standards and all that. It's zoning bylaws that take away all the dimensional standards. And I'll just, make sure that we don't forget that. So you may think we're doing some things that'll help the district, but the Seaport District and Watertown and all these other towns are building lab communities faster than we can, grab new ones. So, I just put a vote in to remind ourselves about, the zero lot line, no rules kind of zoning of the future, which we're seeing over the last 5 years.
I think we've come a long way, but I do think also that in particular with regard to sustainability, we have to find a middle ground. It's not nothing and it's not everything. It's somewhere that's reasonable and takes into account the realities of it. I don't think it's reasonable for us to expect that there will be no requirements as to sustainability. And I think that from the sustainability perspective, the proponents, I hope, listen to those who spoke on behalf of, but also about reasonableness in the real world of correct sustainability provisions. And I think there is a, as they say in the business, there's a deal to be made where two people come together, or two sides come together and work out an effective and workable solution. Okay. Can we move on to the next topic?
Well, can I just add one thing, Charles?
Sure.
I just wanted to remind people that the zoning changes that were made last fall did take effect on Monday. So there has been some concrete progress in this area.
Oh, for sure. There's no question about it, Charles.
Yep.
I mean, we may have lost sight of that. I don't think we have, but without your articles passing, I don't think we'd be as far along as we are. If trailblazer is the right word, I guess you are a trailblazer. Okay. More to come. Fast and furious as well. All right. Next item on our agenda is meet and greet with Ed Nardi, the owner of the former Boston Sports Club site. And Ed, I think, is going to tell us what he's thinking about for the future use of the Boston Sports Club property and how we can go about thinking about it. Ed?
Yes, Rick, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you, Rick, and the board for accommodating the discussion this morning. Just as a very quick backdrop to the last year, obviously the pandemic early in 2020, Boston Sports Club stopped, rent payments, of course, back in March of 2020, given the business fell so dramatically and ultimately closed for a period of time. And in September, their bankruptcy proceedings, and our lease was rejected in bankruptcy, which in one sense creates an interim burden on the carrier of the property, but presents the opportunity to have this discussion of redevelopment far faster than if the lease lived its entirety of its options, which was an additional 10 years. And then fast forward, as of today, the club is, operating, kind of partially operating. We've got a couple of swim teams at the pool, and we just opened up with another group a tennis effort there. Again, all very short-term leases, good groups, generally local. And but the idea is, hopefully working with the town and boards such as this, we can get to a much better kind of redevelopment opportunity here going forward. And as some of you might know, Larry, I know I bumped into Larry on a couple of meetings with the town and town staff and certain selects and planning board members over the past 4.5 years. Again, discussing the potential opportunity if something like this were to happen, i.e. the Boston Sports Club terminating business, whether it was through, tough economic times and or, unfortunately, the pandemic. And as part of that effort over the past few years, we looked at a number of potential, again, high-level concepts, both all commercial. Back then it was a little bit more office driven, of course. And then of course, mixed use, multifamily and commercial, all kind of in the range of 300,000 to 350,000 feet on the 9-acre site. And I've of course worked with Amanda and Sandhya over the past few months, kind of looking at the site, obviously following the rezoning efforts in fall. Of course, we fell short of being included in the new zoning down Hartwell Ave by, I think it was a 10% vote we fell short of. And we have looked at a mixed use concept there, approximately 180 units and about 160,000 feet of commercial. And I guess that is certainly acknowledging that we're on the other side of the street and we are abutting some residential. The Drummer Boyd Condo Association obviously is directly abuts us to the rear of the site. But then again, I think, you know, obviously Boston Properties is it's obviously a leader in the commercial world in the greater Boston area and beyond. Most of the lab players that we've talked with and some of the projects we've done recently, most notably in Somerville at Assembly Row, you know, a lot of the major players are looking for no less than, you know, I think the 250,000 square feet or better on kind of what they're hunting for. Obviously, multifamily is always, there's a dearth of multifamily we know in the greater Boston area and again, beyond. So that is always a primary asset class, you know, kind of year in and year out. So there's that is sustainable in the sense that you can usually build that in most times. So I guess you know, I'd love to hear some feedback from the board, of course. But, you know, we presented again to planning an economic development, the idea of a mixed use, but we're also comfortable going all commercial. Obviously, lab is on everybody's thought today. And I guess I would just footnote that, you know, we just finished permitting a smaller lab building in Watertown. We permitted a very large project of all lab at Assembly Row in Somerville. And of course, we can appreciate, because we read about it every day in the paper, of more and more lab coming. And it's not 50,000 or 100,000, it's 500,000 square feet or 1 million square feet, chunks at a time. So my only minor cautionary note is that on all commercial lab only would be concerning, perhaps, just because you just don't know how much supply is coming. Not all the supply will be built, of course, but you know, I guess one of the thoughts is looking for some flexibility of uses on the site, whether it be multifamily and/or commercial lab, again, which we're fine with. But I would be concerned about too much supply being delivered, and then if it's just a commercial lab, that site might sit fallow for a while because it's, you know, it's a big lift to build lab buildings. You know, my latest pricing is about $800 to $850 a square foot, inclusive of all costs and tenant improvement costs, most notably. But we certainly would like to get something zoned, working with the town and the various and the community that could get built, you know, in a reasonable time frame. So again, just to summarize, if we, you know, looking at a couple of primary uses there would be helpful. So anyway, with that, I would just open it up to you know, any questions or just general discussion. But I think that those are the general efforts we've talked about with the town. You know, 300,000 feet plus or minus, which again, it would be well under an FAR of 1. Height issues came up in our discussion with planning and economic development. We certainly wouldn't think we'd be building to 115 feet. I think that's the height allowed across the way, and some of the newer zoning. We could certainly modify that fairly significantly if that was the desire of the town and the abutting communities had concerns with that. So again, we're flexible. We do play in the commercial and the multifamily asset classes. So again, would like to get a sense of, you know, the board. Obviously, you guys are well versed in the commercial world on all these asset classes. So I'd like to get it'd be great to get some kind of perspective how you see 475 Bedford Street as well. Thank you.
Okay. Comments from committee members?
Rick, this is Larry. I know, you know, when we visited this years ago, there was a strong EDAC, you know, anti-housing kind of comment. I'd just like to say that I would support, you know, any mixed use, you know, as long as it has a retail component, something that helps the district. You know, and when I say any use, I'd support a housing use there, a housing / commercial, similar to the one that Ed put up. but I think it's critical that we keep some, retail component to it to support the district. Because, the retail is not going to get built down Hartwell Avenue. We know that. It's only going to happen on Bedford Street. So, if this site is a gateway site and, Starbucks, anything that could support that district would be helpful. So, I would switch my vote to say that any, housing, commercial, mixed use development that could be put in place quickly to help the developer and the town on this. And, similar to Third Ave, the housing that was built by Nordblum up there as the last piece of their Third Ave development was one where it was designed for, one bedroom, largely one bedroom, some two bedroom, but it wasn't, got to be careful here. It wasn't sort of family housing. It was built for workers that were working in that area. And I support that kind of concept. So, my vote would be to, free it up so that something could be put in place quickly, but don't forget about how that site could support the district.
John McQueenie, you're a resident of Drummer Boy. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to add at the moment?
Not really. We've talked to Ed before. We've talked about the situation for him among all the board members of Drummer Boy. I mean, we haven't found a lot of opposition to any particular project. I think anything might be possible.
Okay. Anybody else? Charlie?
Yeah, I do agree with what Larry said about the retail portion, because I'm at the end of Hartwell Ave at 131, and when I show my space here, people are always asking me what's available, where can we go, or even if I need to go grab something before I go home, like I basically have to travel to the center of town, so I'm causing more traffic. So if we can get something out here as a retail component, that'd be huge.
Hey, Rick, if I may, this is Ed. Rick?
Go ahead, Ed. This is the vice chair, and go ahead.
Oh,
There I am.
okay, thank you. Oh, hey, Rick. Hey, just speaking to the retail component, in previous iterations of the high-level concepts, 2, 3, 4 years ago, we had to the very point of the concept of gateway and the acknowledging that Hartwell Ave is a dead end ultimately, so it is somewhat difficult for any kind of quality retail to really grab hold down there. We had worked into the high-level concept towards the front end of the site, a retail component, service, good quality service retail along the lines of whether it's a coffee shop, a good quality, high-end casual dining, mostly kind of breakfast, lunch, and maybe some dinner as well, of course. But again, we heard the request kind of loud and clear from certain previous members of planning staff that some type of retail component would be almost necessary there, as well as critical to that servicing of the Hartwell corridor. So we are in sync with that. And again, I think we just have to be mindful of in today's retail world. We have to build a pretty good mousetrap, because there's obviously the host of retail that's fallen out, unfortunately, with the pandemic. But we hear you, and we agree with that concept as well. We just, again, one of the things to take into consideration here is the traffic and circulation and access. And we've got to be smart about how we build that traffic model and access into the site and out of the site so that, retail can work well, throughout the day, as well as, of course, service any commercial and or residential build there.
Okay.
So thank you.
Ed, just so you know, I'm not sure whether you're able to see our screen, but I did share the plans that you had shared with
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and again, there's the, a concept. If you're looking at that screen, which is I think it's 10 or 15,000 feet of retail towards the front end, about 150,000 feet of commercial, and then that straddles a shared parking garage with the multifamily in the back, with keeping some of the surface parking, obviously, to utilize. That's all can be utilized under the high power lines there. So, but it would be modified, of course. So that's one concept there. It is kind of a mixed use approach. And I would also agree with a comment as well previously about the housing. We had thought about, again, the 1-bedroom studios, maybe a smattering of 2 bedrooms, but again, trying to build high quality housing for the abutting business community as well, because that it works better hand in hand than it isolated just commercial park per se. So that was part of the thought behind that as well. That those wouldn't be necessarily a lot of family units, 3 bedrooms, because again, I don't think it'll play that well at that location, and B, I think it's more appropriate for, again, high quality workforce housing or housing that's going to be utilized by the workforce in the area.
Okay. I assume this conversation is to be continued in some fashion at some levels with planning and economic development. Anybody else care?
Yes, from what yes,
But
yeah, Rick, from what I understand, that obviously the town is very busy prepping for the Springtown meeting. So I think always stay in touch with Sandhya and Amanda, but I think they've got their plate full. So I think we're going to re-engage after the town meeting when they get a little bit of rest after that. But truly the hope is if ideally if we can try to make it to the fall town meeting in regard to the site, that would be very appreciated, given you've got to get to market as quickly as possible before we lose the cycle, and the cycle is evolving pretty quickly out there. So, and again, anything would be appreciated to try to move the site forward in a better manner.
good step to come here before the Economic Development Advisory Committee and start setting the table.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for being here this morning, Ed, and making a presentation.
Thank you, Rick. The apologies, it was a little bit of a loose presentation, but again, we're at such a conceptual level at this point. Didn't want to get too far into the details, but really looking for that, and I appreciate the kind of the big picture feedback.
No,
Helpful.
and you gave us some good feedback in terms of your willingness to consider retail, but your wariness about type of retail, given the era, the pandemic era we live in, and traffic circulation, access in and out being a component of what kind of retail you do, if you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have any
Thank you very much.
questions for Ed?
Yeah, Dunkin' Donuts would be okay too.
See what we can do for you, Larry. Next on the agenda is the discussion of town meeting article, what is it, 29 now, not 31? Cindy?
Yes, 29. Thank you very much, Rick. So thank you to the Economic Development Advisory Committee for letting us speak today. I'm from Sustainable Lexington. As you may know, Todd Rhodes is also here from Sustainable Lexington. It's too bad that I know that Ben Myers and the other Boston Properties staff were are busy and had to go, but maybe we can get some feedback. Rick, maybe if you
Yeah.
circle back. Actually, I do want to say, Sandhya, whatever meeting or you put together with Boston Properties about the Hartwell feedback, I would love to be involved as well. Thank you.
By all
So
means, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I have a few slides, but I didn't know I could just sort of talk quickly through it, go quickly through some slides. I don't know how much the committee knows about this, so I'll leave that up to you, Rick, in terms of how much time you want to take.
Why don't you give us a quick overview? I'm not sure anybody's read this yet, so if you gave us a quick overview and
Read it.
give us a little bit of homework to do, that would be good.
Okay, so basically this is in response. So you may have heard that Brookline wanted to pass or tried to pass a bylaw to basically start the transition for getting combustion of fossil fuels out of buildings, and it got struck down by the Attorney General, but with some very the Attorney General was very supportive. She just said that you can't do it this way. So the way that the path that we're going that they went down, Arlington also went down, was to ask for a home rule petition to basically start the transition for our buildings to no longer use fossil fuels. Why do we have to do that? Well, the state already has a Global Warming Solutions Act to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050. We have in our town a Getting to Net Zero Emissions Plan. Rick, and maybe the committee knows that that plan was, Boston Properties was one of the sort of stakeholders in that plan, and we need to get to net zero emissions from our buildings by 2043. This part of that plan is doing exactly what we're doing now, which is like starting the transition. What this applies to is new construction and major renovation only. And there are some key exemptions which make sense. It actually ties in very much to what we were talking about with what happened with Article 16 and what Ben Myers and the other Boston Properties representatives were talking about. So no, we're basically saying that you can't use no new fuel connections, fossil fuel connections in new construction or major renovations defined as for commercial 50% or more of the gross floor area, for residential 75% or more of the gross floor area. And the other exemptions are for large buildings greater than 10,000 square feet. It does not apply to the hot water system. And for commercial buildings, lab, life science, medical buildings, it does not apply to them. And then for but on the residential side, because this applies to residential as well, exemptions are for cooking, for fireplaces, outdoor heating, generators, things like that. So the focus is on heating and hot water. And there's also built into the language a waiver process. So if there's some things just really can't be done, there's still a process to work around it. We expect this to apply to about basically 1% of the buildings in town, where new homes are going up at a rate of about 80 to 100 per year. So it's about 1% or less than 1% of our buildings. So, but we felt that doing this now was important because those new buildings are going to have systems in there that are going to last 15, 20, 25 years. And we want to, stop digging the hole of emissions and get it out of those systems and prevent costly, retrofits that are going to, most certainly be required in that time frame within 15 to 20 years. What else did I want to say about this? Oh, there's also time to plan. Because of it being a home rule petition, we expect, and we have written into the draft language, that this would take effect no sooner than December of 2022. We've got a bunch of outreach going on. As I mentioned, we have a panel discussion happening next week, and we think that we're just trying to sort of engage the community, let them know, because there's a lot of myths out there about things like heat pumps or highly efficient electricity can't work in New England. It most definitely can, and it can at a cost that is not much different than the other systems that are going in today. I think I'll leave it at that. And what we really want to hear is certainly questions, but concerns. We want to hear about that.
Okay, thank you. I would encourage everyone to spend some time reading Article 29, and we can segues into when we have our next meeting. We ought to maybe have our next meeting either at the very end of February. When does town meeting start? Does Jill know? Anybody know?
It's usually, the first day is usually the last Monday in March.
It's yes.
All right,
it's
so
I think March.
we have a little bit of time if we were to meet in the first Wednesday in March for our next EDEC meeting. We can talk about this article if you'd like. That makes sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, and in the meantime, I understand, being on a committee myself, sort of how you can't deliberate, but the individuals, if you have any questions, please, or concerns, we're happy to get them sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
This is Todd Rose. I just wanted to add one thing to what Cindy said, just as background. I think it's just important to know that, so Brookline, and Cindy, correct me if I'm missing anyone, but so Brookline and Arlington have very similar home rule petitions in the works, and they both have approved them already, I believe. That's, yeah. And so the team that put this together did a great amount of work to make sure that the language in this bylaw is consistent with the language being used by Brookline and Arlington, so that when the home rule petition does get to the Attorney General, there's a consistent set of exemptions and approaches and so forth being followed, so that it's kind of consistent across the region. So what this article represents is one of several efforts going to the Attorney General, and if approved, then the bylaw would take effect right after that.
Well, it would have to. It would have to go to special legislation. But yes, Todd, thank you. And actually, one thing to point out is we have reached out to our legislative delegation: Michelle Chicolo, Mike Barrett, and Cindy Friedman. You might know, Todd mentioned that Arlington passed this overwhelmingly, and we share a Senator Friedman with Arlington. So. And I actually just learned recently that I believe that Concord is on their way to doing a very similar thing. Again, like Todd said, with similar language. And we think that's, I don't have my list here, but there's Acton and Worcester. There's a number of places that are doing very similar things.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is Economic Development Office updates, if there are any, beyond what we've talked about.
Thank you, Rick. Quickly, beyond Hartwell, we are also preparing for the Center Streetscape project, which is, I believe, which will start construction probably in March. I just wanted to give a quick update on that. So they're going to have a contractor probably this week, I believe. And the Economic Development Office is working closely with the Public Information Officer to create some sort of a communication packet so that it reaches out to as many folks as possible so that we understand that this project is going to commence. And the schedule is April to November, 2 cycles of construction season. If you want additional information, I'll be happy to send that along. And other than that, there's another construction that's going to happen. It's more of a project that that was on stall, which is the Green Mill Alley, which is the bike addition of bike racks on the Green Mill Alley, or the bike path that is there near right behind the CVS lot. So that's another project that will start probably somewhere in April. So those are 2 projects I wanted to give you heads up. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I would like to highlight and underscore the importance of the 2 sessions that are scheduled for tomorrow, one at 8 a.m., which is Sanjay said, a coffee. I think, Larry, if you come, you have to bring your own coffee, Dunkin' Donuts or otherwise, unless you have an ingenious way to get it through the computer. And you can get the information on the website. And also the planning board hearing tomorrow evening at 7. I would encourage individuals and members to attend that meeting and chime in with individual comments should you like. And Jill, we will take your suggestion and get something to the select board. You're absolutely correct that we are a committee that reports to the selectmen, and we will do that.
It's more than reports to. You actually advise us. So we're looking for your advice.
Very good. All right. Unless anybody has anything else, we do need, why don't we see if we can set another meeting before we adjourn? Okay.
You also need to adjourn by roll call vote, just FYI.
Yep. Okay. How about the first Wednesday in March, which would be March 3rd? Does that work?
Works for me.
It works.
Yep, okay.
Okay?
Yep.
March 3rd it is. Okay. I move that we adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second,
Who seconded it?
Dave.
Dave Pronchek, okay, by roll call, all in favor. DeAngelis, yes. Smith,
Yes.
Brunel. Yes, right?
Yes.
Okay. With McQueenie,
Yes.
Pronchek,
Yes.
Manasian.
Yes.
It's a unanimous vote to adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.